and welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation video podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Onoye, founder and CEO of the Sophia Consulting Firm, a WeBank certified life science marketing and communications consultancy that was established in New York City with the goal of amplifying scientific innovation. The goal of this podcast is to showcase the importance of science advocacy, health equity, and influential leadership through conversations with senior leaders who share a unique leadership journey, corporate vision, and industry outlook. My guest today is Ms. Daphne Zohar, founder and CEO of PureTech Health, a clinical stage biotherapeutics company that she founded over 17 years ago with the goal of developing BIG, brain, immune, gut medicines. I connected with Daphne on LinkedIn, where we have over 450 mutual connections. And obviously, she's a woman that I highly respect because of how influential she is in the industry. And it's truly an honor and pleasure to welcome you to the show, Daphne.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Now, I always start the show with the same question, which is quite simple, but it could be a little challenging. So what is your definition of scientific innovation?
Well, I think if you start with the word innovation, a lot of people like to use that term, but to me, it really means doing something different than what others are doing. So when you think about scientific innovation, I think it's important to start with a background of what has been done in the past, and then to build on that with something that's truly novel. Surprisingly, I think a lot of times people tend to sort of innovate in incremental ways. And so for me, I think innovation is sort of taking a big leap forward.
Wow, taking a bigger leap forward. That is remarkable, and I really appreciate that. So I imagine that this is also the case for PureTech, which is renowned for its unique discovery process. So tell us more about how you pioneered your company's components of value, and what is your vision for the future?
Right. So, when we were starting PureTech, what struck me is that a lot of scientific innovations or new medicines get advanced by an individual, whether it be an entrepreneur or a scientist, and that person tends to get very excited about the thing that they're developing and sees the world through the lens of that idea. So, for example, if they have a specific platform, they're looking at everything else that's going on in the field, and they're thinking about how their platform could be better. And what we wanted to do in founding PureTech was sort of to flip it around, to say what's going on. Can we look in an unbiased way at the problems that need to be solved? And can we then look at a range of different ways, different tools one could bring to solving those problems? So it's a little bit different because it starts with the disease or the problem as opposed to starting with a platform technology. And I think that led us to this unique model, which was almost like an institutional version of what an entrepreneur does. Now, interestingly, a lot of venture firms have also moved towards what's called venture creation. And in a biotech format, there's this new hub and spoke model, which we were really one of the first ones to advance. And I think actually has a lot of advantages over the traditional sort of binary biotech development model. And I'm happy to say more about that.
Yeah, please go ahead. I'm still massively curious, but go ahead.
Yes. So when we were forming these new medicines, and now we've taken 25 new therapeutics and advanced them, 16 are in clinic, and 2 have gone all the way from inception at PureTech through FDA and European regulatory clearances. So we're really proud of that track record. And having done that, initially what we did was, because we started with very little resources, we would put the medicine, the IP, intellectual property, in a subsidiary company. And what we have is, in that case, what we were able to do is partner with other investors to advance those technologies. But what we learned from that was that it's very beneficial for a management team to have multiple programs that one could move resources between. The reason for that is that when we get mixed results around a program, we shut it down, right, or move our resources to other programs. And when you have, for example, only one platform that you're advancing, there's a tendency to want to keep going with that platform, and less, I think, sort of less discipline in moving the resources or shutting down programs. So I think that's one advantage of the hub and spoke model. And the hub is basically the one management team. The spokes are multiple programs. Now, the other advantages of the hub and spoke model is that scientific, discovery and early preclinical work, it tends to go in sort of bursts. So what happens if you have a team that can move between programs? You might be running one experiment, then you can go and work on other experiments. And so actually that's much more efficient from a scientific standpoint and from a team standpoint as well, because you just have, if somebody has a lot of capacity, they can do multiple programs and move and get more done. So I think from an efficiency standpoint, from a discipline, and also aligning the management team with shareholders, this hub and spoke model has a lot of advantages. It's very entrepreneurial. Right. It's kind of like a hybrid between big pharma and venture creation. So we see ourselves in many ways building a major biopharmaceutical company, but our mindset is very entrepreneurial.
Right. I love that. I think that that's really remarkable. And it ties back into your definition of scientific innovation, because ultimately it's about scale and it's about impact. And if we continue to rely on just individuals to advance the state of science, I think we're limiting innovation. So thank you for that great description. I appreciate it. So, but I'm curious again, right? So out of all the companies that you have invested in thus far, who might you consider to be the top three, just in terms of innovation and overall impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we often get that. And I want to just point out that all of the companies that the sort of founded entities originally were programs internally at PureTech. So we actually came up with the idea. We were co-inventors. We advanced programs, and at some point we brought in outside investors. Now, recently we've decided that we're going to keep our programs and not give up ownership. But I think people often think that we found, like the Karuna team came and pitched us and we invested in it. That's not what happened. We created that program. So obviously Karuna is one of the ones that would be well known. It's about, it's NASDAQ listed, about $3.5 billion company developing one of the first new treatments for schizophrenia in over 60 years. And we're really proud of that because what we got a bunch of experts together who are leaders in schizophrenia research and clinical development. Everybody was really excited about this muscarinic hypothesis. They were excited about it because of data that was generated at Eli Lilly with xanomeline. And our team came up with the idea of enabling that program to move forward. It had previously been held back because of GI-related tolerability issues. So we came up with a concept of coupling a muscarinic agonist, xanomeline, with a muscarinic antagonist, trospium chloride. And by doing that, you get the efficacy in the CNS, but also avoid many of the peripheral AEs. So we came up with this idea. We got access to xanomeline from Lilly, and then advanced it and showed that it improved the tolerability, and then set up a phase 2 study, which was then run by a team that we had put together at PureTech, and that read out and was very successful and generated a lot of excitement about Karuna and the KarXT platform. So obviously that one. A second one I would note is Gelisys, which is developing a treatment for supporting people in weight management. So basically, and it's got the broadest label of any weight management approach. So it's indicated for individuals between 25 to 40 BMI, together with diet and exercise. And that's now been cleared for marketing both in the US and EU. And the reason I think that one is so exciting is because think of it this way. It's using building blocks that are made from food ingredients. And those building blocks come together in what's called a super absorbent hydrogel. So you swallow a capsule, there's thousands of little particles, and those particles swell in your stomach and take up about 20% to 25% of the stomach volume. So what they do is in many ways mimic like the surgical approaches of reducing the volume that's available for other food, making you feel more full and more satisfied with the food that you have. But because it's made from food ingredients, it's very similar to eating like a lot of vegetables. And in terms of what it does inside your body, it has a lot of benefits that are similar to eating vegetables. So you're taking a capsule, you're getting the benefits of reduced stomach volume, but also other benefits from vegetables, not the nutrient or calorie content, but other positive effects, for example, in the gut barrier and microbiome, things like that. So that one is, I'm really excited about. That's launched together with Ro, which is a telemedicine provider. And they just announced, for example, that they got a $30 million pre-order from Ro, fully paid. And they've done a deal with a Chinese, very good Chinese pharmaceutical company named China Medical Systems Holdings. So that's really exciting. And they've agreed to enter into a SPAC agreement. So that is soon to be a publicly traded company. And then the third one, you asked me to mention three, and obviously we have three. These founded entities are like children, and so it's hard to pick. But the ones that are most grown up, I guess, are Karuna Genesis and Akili, which would be the third one I would mention. Akili developed Endeavor RX, which is the first and only FDA cleared treatment of ADHD, which is delivered through a video game. Now, as I'm going through these examples, hopefully you're getting a sense for this concept of scientific innovation. When we founded Akili, the idea was that you could, in a non-invasive way, modulate attention and cognition. Now, all of us know how our devices have an impact on us, right? They can affect our mood, and they can affect our attention. And it turns out that there was scientists that were studying the effects, for example, of first-person shooters, video games, and their improvement of cognitive measures. And there was another scientist who was studying the effects of what he calls distractors or interrupters, cognitive interference. So we brought all of this together and developed this concept of a experience that has an impact on attention and cognition. And we actually, in doing that, formed Akili, and Akili developed and did actually a phase 3 study. And that phase 3 study compared the Akili product to a video game that was developed by the same people, the same game designers, actually, who used to be at LucasArts, and they worked with George Lucas there. And what they did is that the other game was a war game. So it was like a sham in this study. And it was pre-tested with parents to have expectation of benefit. So really, the idea was to show that this specific approach that Akili was taking, which had to do with training this idea of cognitive interference processing, had benefit in a phase 3 study over another game. And that did meet its primary endpoint, and it's now cleared for marketing in the US and the EU. And again, they have a deal with Shionogi in Japan and Taiwan. And so I'm really excited about those three as being the most advanced. But we have other founded entities, and of course, our wholly owned pipeline, which is now in multiple clinical studies and is focused on immunology and the lymphatic system.
Wow. I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point. I think I'm blown away by the diversity of innovation, the scale, the impact, and really the novelty, right? Video games, cognitive interference, looking at schizophrenia, weight management. These are real issues that we all deal with at different points in our lives, whether as individuals, as patients, as caregivers and such. And I'm just really impressed. And as you said, it's like talking about your favorite children. Just because you mentioned these three doesn't mean that there's not a lot more going on behind the scenes. But that speaks to you as a leader, and it also ties into one of the follow-up questions that I have for you. But I hope that every once in a while you take a few steps back and you pause and you look at what you've accomplished and just give yourself a little pat, not a big one, just a little pat on the shoulder, because that is truly remarkable.
Well, thank you. But people like me and you probably always tend to think about the next challenge ahead of us, and
yes.
So always focus on everything that we need to do going forward. But thank you for that. And I hope you do the same.
I thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying to become more mindful. So that's my New Year's resolution, but we can get into that at a different time. Now, my next question for you is Boston, right? Boston is considered to be the #1 biotech cluster in the world. How have you leveraged some of the unique challenges that you faced as one of the very first female biotech founders to ensure greater representation of minorities and women-led biotech companies in PureTech Health's investment portfolio?
Yeah, so when I was getting started, I think that, I had a mixed perspective on what it meant to be, a woman entrepreneur. I think in some ways there was, there were some advantages in that you stand out and people remember you and people will take the meeting. And from a networking perspective, there's that initial advantage. I think that there's a pattern recognition issue that all, entrepreneurs that come from diverse groups face. And that is that you look around and it's hard to point to many other examples of, past success, and people tend to want to, especially investors, they bet based on pattern recognition, both in terms of individuals, in terms of what the company looks like. So, I think that presented challenges in the early days. And the way I dealt with it as an entrepreneur was I brought around me people that provided confidence and support and had that sort of track record of success. Now, that was beneficial for me because I got to learn from these people and work with them. But it was also beneficial for outside parties in gaining some confidence in this new idea in the early days. And then afterwards, we built our own track record and delivered results and showed that we could execute. And we sort of built our own track record of success. But I think that, bringing around you people that other people know is a helpful way to overcome that. Now, as we move forward, there's more and more examples of diverse, and successful entrepreneurs. I hope to have a situation in a few years from now where, there's many examples and we can provide those examples for the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Good, extremely well said, and also ties into my follow-up question. I just want to know what your secret, your magic formula is, because you have successfully recruited Nobel Prize laureates and other well-respected luminaries in your board and R&D committee. So what is your policy on board recruitment, and what advice would you have for young people, especially women, who are looking to secure their very first board biotech seat?
I think that sometimes it's easier to get somebody who's at the very top of their game than to go for sort of the up and coming or mid-career folks. So I think what I did that was very helpful was I was able to engage with people who were really at the top of their career, and they didn't have anything to prove to others. So Bob Langer, Bob Horvitz, Raju Kuchilapati, these are people, John LaMattina, Chris Viebacher, these are people that have already proven themselves so many times over, and they didn't, they could look at the idea, look at the team and say, I believe in this team, I believe in this idea, I want to be affiliated with it. Somebody who's in mid-career stages will be more likely to be hesitant about a management team or a new idea. So I think helpful. And then there's this critical mass that happens. If you get a couple of 2 or 3 people in the room that everybody else wants to be with, that's to attract others.
Right.
And then over time, I think importantly, having a long-term viewpoint and treating people well. So if you have a choice of, making a little bit more for your company or treating somebody well, you always err to the side of treating somebody well. And that way you build a group of, you give back, but you also build a group of individuals that want to work with you again, want to recommend working with you. And so we've done that. Now we've built this amazing network of scientific leaders really in their fields. And I think they enjoy being together because we're also pushing the envelope and sometimes ideas that come up in our brainstorming sessions lead to papers. We've now 25 papers in major journals that were published after we filed key IP or in-licensed technology. So, I think that all of those things are helpful.
Oh, I mean, again, extremely well said. Bob Langer in particular stands out to me because he's an advisor for Daré Bioscience, and I sit on the board of directors of Daré Bioscience, which is a leading women's health company. So I think to your point, these individuals that are extremely well respected, but you shouldn't be, if I read in between the lines, don't be intimidated by the titles and such. Reach out to them, and you never know, they might surprise you, because that at that stage in their careers where they don't have anything to prove, like you said, and they're willing to lend their time. So thank you for sharing those perspectives with us.
Yeah, and I think your second part of your question was about women sitting on boards, and sounds like you're doing that. I think that one good thing I've seen over the last 2 to 3 years is that women are increasingly high demand, and particularly women from diverse groups. So, for example, we have a search going on right now for chair of the audit committee, and all that we're looking at is women, and ideally women from diverse groups. And so, like at the very bottom of the list is just sort of like a typical white male. Now, part of that is because we want to increase diversity, but also we've got amazing candidates, and it's exciting. But you see that these people are really sought after. So I think it's great news for women that everybody's trying to recruit C-level women, and everybody's trying to recruit women on their boards.
That's great. I mean, I think we all appreciate diversity of thought. So it's not just, we're going to bring in a woman, but I think that a woman might have a unique perspective based on her own shared experiences in the industry that she can lead to a board or an R&D committee. So thank you again for sharing those perspectives. Now, I imagine you would not be who you are today without some mentors that have helped to shape your career journey to date. So similar to my previous question about your favorite investment, so to speak, are there any notable mentors that have helped to shape your career journey to date?
Well, I think that I would start with my parents, because, they always, I wasn't like somebody who liked to sit in classrooms or, do my homework or whatever, but they always believed in me, and they were always very supportive. And, anything I said I wanted to do, they were like, okay, I wanted to start a company when I was in high school and I was 16. And they were supportive of that and helped me. And I think that that belief is very important for children as they grow up in adolescence, especially people who might have a little bit of neurodiversity, because, if you're not the typical student in a classroom, you get a lot of negative feedback. So I think I'd start with my parents. And then I would say at PureTech, I just have these board members that they're just really incredible individuals. They're very kind. But they taught me a lot. So, for example, I'll give one, but I think, again, all of them are amazing. Ben Shapiro, who's actually now retired from our board, is on our R&D committee. He was head of R&D at Merck. And one thing I learned from him was that he would sit there and he would listen with full attention to whatever somebody was presenting to him. And then he would ask the question that was the critical question, whatever the flaw in the idea was. He would find that flaw and ask that question, but he would do it in a really kind way. And so what I learned from him, I think, was two things. Was number one, how do you find the flaw and focus on that and think about that, the problem right off the bat. And I think just having watched him do that many times, I've internalized a lot of that, and I'm always focused on that. And the second thing I would say about him is just the kindness and the way that he does it, that doesn't ever humiliate somebody or put them in a position of being inferior to him. And so those are two things that I've learned from Ben Shapiro, but I could take any one of my board members and, probably give you a couple of examples like that.
No, thank you for sharing that. I was born in Nigeria, and one thing that I've learned in the almost 20 years that I've been in the US is that kindness is universal. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Now, my second to last question for you is fairly simple, so to speak, but what are some key factors that you think will be important for sustaining innovation in the life science industry?
That's a great question. I think that, this industry, what it has is a lot of very smart people who are I think skeptical by nature, and who there's a community. The community is wonderful. I feel really lucky to have been embraced by the community over time, but there is this sense of dismissiveness sometimes towards people who are not in the community. And I think that in particular, I see that when you hear about, people from the technology industry who want to come in and make changes or impact our industry, there's a lot of dismissiveness towards that group. Like, you're not going to come and tell us how to do drug discovery and development. But I think we as an industry could learn a lot from the technology industry in certain areas. For example, commercialization, smaller companies being able to commercialize, not just handing that off to a big pharma company. And I also think in areas that relate to AI and others, there tends to be a lot of skepticism there. And there might be some learnings that we could incorporate. So in terms of sustaining innovation, I would say that, being open to outsiders and a little bit more open-minded will ensure that the industry continues to innovate, because it's very good at innovating within the parameters of what's acceptable. But sometimes you need to sort of completely open your mind to embrace the sort of that next level of innovation.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that open-mindedness would allow us to expand and take the best of both worlds, so to speak, and synergize. And so my final question for you is the easiest one. Do you have any other comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with us before we wrap today?
No, I think that, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And, I really admire what you're doing, and I wish you all the best as you're building your business. Continuing to build your business, which is already successful. And, I think that from a PureTech perspective, we're just excited about building our wholly owned pipeline and continuing to grow what we hope will be a major biopharmaceutical company in the future. So that's sort of my mission and goals to do that and hopefully have an impact on the lives of patients around the world. So that's. Yeah.
Oh, that's, again, extremely well said. And thank you. I think PureTech, to me, it's almost the definition of scientific innovation, because you continue to explore multiple pathways. And as you said, it's coming from inside, using that hub and spoke model to really innovate on a breadth and a scale that is probably different than what the industry has ever known. So thank you for being that definition. And we all look up to you in many ways. And we hope that you will continue to be that visionary leader that you are. And thank you for lending your time today. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you again today.
Same here. Take care and have a good day. Okay?